Welcome to Stock Shots. Today is Tuesday, February the 17th, 2009. Every time I put out a video or blog post saying that I think things in our economy are going to get worse, I get emails or comments on my video saying that my perspectives are simply right-wing propaganda. Whether you're Republican or Democrat, whether you like it or not, this economy is getting worse. So you can call my opinions what they are. But the fact that I have said gold is a good investment, the fact that I've called gold to $12.50 in the first quarter, the fact that I have said that the S&P 500 may reach 600 in this year, that does not make my perspectives be right-wing propaganda. I don't care. I've been very plain. The Republicans started the spending like drunken sailor. Bush spending was terrible, and we're continuing in this administration. So blame who you want to. I don't care about the blame. I don't care who's doing it. I'm simply calling what I see in the economy. Things are beginning to really get worse now. We saw absolutely no leadership today. As you looked across the market, you could not find a sector, or at least I couldn't find a sector that offered any leadership. It was an awful day. It was down almost 300 points. If you would point back to the levels that we were at when we were at 14,000, this day would have been percentage-wise the equivalent of a 500-plus down day. And I think one thing that investors have been shortchanging as we go down, we're used to a 300-point down day. But as we get lower and lower, that's a bigger and bigger percentage of our investment portfolios. And ladies and gentlemen, at some point that's going to ring true. Now today we had the UN and the World Bank come forward and say they'd like a piece of the stimulus. Apparently these two Good Samaritan organizations believe they can help get the economy going again by spreading the wealth. Give me a break. These two organizations have never had a completely independent audit. If either the UN or the World Bank gets a dime of U.S. money out of this stimulus package, you as an investor and a taxpayer should feel robbed. Enough said about that subject. Now, let's talk about where I've been wrong. I have admittedly missed the strength in the U.S. dollar. I have been short the dollar through the UDN. I'm totally upside down in that trade. I have continued to think if I just hold on, the dollar will get weaker. And I've done some research, and now I don't think that's the case over the short to intermediate term. And let me explain why. In looking at the situation, there's no doubt that a lot of foreign investors are still investing in the United States as a safe haven. When I was doing my research, kind of a light bulb went off in my head, and it dawned on me how many foreign investors bought into the same crap that the mainstream media put out that we started hearing about this time last year. How many pundits, talking heads did you hear say, we're in the bottoming process? Don't get out now because we're putting in the bottoming process. We've been putting in the bottoming process since, say 10,000. Here we are almost, 25%. 21, 22% lower than that, and we're still hearing the bottoming process term. It's all garbage, but I think a lot of people bought into that, and possibly a lot of foreign investors left their money in the U.S. or brought new dollar-denominated investments into either treasuries in the U.S. or potentially even equities, and so we saw surprising strength in the dollar, and people like myself made that soft dollar bet, and it didn't pay off, and some people that I know of have been squeezed out of it, and so I think that in and of itself has contributed to the dollar being a little bit stronger. When I had Jim Rogers on the show about a month ago, he said, I don't believe now is the time to short the U.S. dollar. There will be a time. Fundamentally, the cards are in. The dollar will get weaker. But I go back to the old saying, it's quite possibly this dollar can stay stronger longer than I can stay solvent in this trade. So I am seriously considering exiting the trade to watch it closely and re-enter. because I am convinced now with my new research that the dollar may stay stronger for quite a period of time. Another thing that I think contributed to a little bit of surprising strength in the dollar, and potentially even more of the short squeeze that I just talked about, our economy is far and away the most advanced in the world. We're also the largest economy. So as things began to unwind, we were hitting Europe with a trickle-down effect. Certainly China was affected by the just evaporation of demand. We weren't really hit with that. So, you know, the old saying of when the U.S. sneezes, the rest of the world catches a cold. Even though our economy was crumbling, at least that was one thing we didn't have pressing down on us. As our own economy deteriorated, we weren't being hit by a trickle-down effect from other economies like some of these, the Eurozone in particular, and China was being hit from us. So as our economy continues to struggle, I think we'll stay stronger again only over the intermediate term because of that fact, because the Eurozone, ladies and gentlemen, is in trouble. Their banking system is quite honestly in worse shape than ours is, and believe me, that's saying something. Now, let me explain what views have led my website to get comments saying that I'm right-wing propaganda. Let's look a little bit deeper into our economy. Let's talk about the banks first. All right, we've already nationalized most of our banks. If you want to argue with that, post a comment, send me an email, but you can't argue with that. Now we see today that with part of the stimulus bill, some of the rhetoric that we've heard coming out of Washington, we're actually going to be incentivizing people not to pay their mortgages. All right, so what the government basically, as I took it in very short summary, the government is saying, okay, those banks that have accepted TARP money are going to be forced to work with the people that have mortgages with them, and they're going to be forced to take cram downs. So now, if you are a marginal or potentially even a capable of paying your mortgage, you could be somewhat incentivized to become late on your mortgage so that the bank would negotiate that principal down, because it is, as I appreciate it, the government is considering requiring for every X amount of funds that the government has in TARP that the banks negotiate that much with the homeowners. That's a potentially terrible scenario, because look at the spin on that. So now the banks are going to have to write down even more on some of their mortgages. So what are they going to do? They're going to take it out on the loans to be made. They're going to have stricter lending requirements. They're going to be ever more watchful of their balance sheets. And so this one program or this one idea could effectively continue to squeeze off the artery of credit. So this actually might make things worse, aside from the moral hazard of incentivizing people who can pay not to pay. And we won't work ourselves out of this crisis until our banking system is healed via capitalism. It won't be healed via government intervention. It will never work. If it would have worked, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac would have been good, well-oiled, functioning machines. It just won't work. This is a problem that has to be healed by capitalism, and we are looking more towards socialism, especially in the banks. Now let's talk about the automakers. So GM and Chrysler go back to Capitol Hill today, and surprise, they need more money. Again, we're throwing good money after bad, regardless of what moral side you're on as to whether or not the automakers need to survive. And if I've got listeners that are dependent on the automakers, this is not a shot at you by any stretch of the imagination. I appreciate everybody needing their job, but in all honesty, these mammoth giant companies have worked themselves into a position, potentially you could say they're too big to fail, but in any case, you would have to say that government subsidies to these entities are, and I'll go back and talk about what Gerald Celente said, it's not going to give us a new productive capacity. And in my opinion, we're not going to have at least initially, we're not going to have a more fuel efficient car.